This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 148. 148, we're getting close to a nice round number. Today, we're talking about finding loads through relationships. I am your host, Craig. Over there, he's Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Craig. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
Feeling chipper. Feeling ready to cement some relationships. Okay.
Awesome.
Now, I'll be up front with everybody. We've got a heck of a story for you to start. Okay, so it's going to be a few minutes before we get into the meat of this episode. But before we even get into the story, I'll remind everybody to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes and documentation and all the stuff that goes along with this show. Also, go to this fine website that you can see on my t-shirt if you're watching on YouTube. I'm wearing the wrong one. I thought this was it's motorcarrierhq.com. I'm wearing the wrong one. I get confused. Chris, I'm getting old.
Hey, we're offsetting each other because I'm wearing the Motor Carrier HQ
There you go.
swag.
You can get all of this swag at motorcarrierhq.com. You can also find tools, tips, resources for you to make the jump from being an employee driver to being an owner-operator or beyond, building a fleet if that is your heart's desire. All right. Chris, am I missing anything?
No, but I was just going to say, speaking of relationships, we're coming up on 5 years.
I know.
Can you believe that?
I know. I was just reflecting on that.
Not many people hang out with me for 5 years. So you've hit a milestone that's like pretty impressive.
Well, it helps when you pay people to hang out with you.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So that's my secret with all my other podcasts. I just it's just a ruse to make friends, right? All right. We ought to tell the story. It's not that exciting, but we should tell the story sometime of when you approached me to do the show, maybe for episode 150 or something.
All right, there you go. That's a good idea.
All right. So, Chris, you've got a story for me. A story is kind of shortchanging it. Is it a saga? Is it an epic?
Ooh, saga.
It's
a drama.
There you go.
There was some drama involved.
It's a melodrama.
Seems like sagas have drama in them.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So what happened? What's going on out on the road?
We had one of our trucks break down. So I'm gonna walk you through. We're gonna use dates. I've got notes and dollar figures.
I'm holding this up for the camera right now. Like, oh, okay, you can't really see it, but it goes on.
It goes on and on,
yeah.
and on and on. It was like one of the most, well, not one of, absolutely by far the most ridiculous repair situation we've ever had.
Okay. Can I, you know what? This is unusual, but I am going to throw off your story and ask for a bottom line up front. What did this cost? And then I want you to tell me why and what happened.
I haven't totaled it completely, but $5,000-ish.
Okay.
If you include all the tow bills, it was mostly tow bills.
Yeah. Those are the worst.
It's actually, I think it's $7,000 if I'm adding things up right. About $5,000 in tow bills and about $2,000 in repairs.
That is brutal.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you said 5, I was like, could be worse.
Essentially a repair that cost $1,000.
Oh boy. All right. What happened?
All right. So February 1st, our driver had spent the night parked about 30 miles away from where she's supposed to deliver.
Okay.
And this is Jeannie, poor Jeannie. And she goes to start her truck in the morning and it won't start. Like ignition issue, like not a battery issue. Like it's
not even clicking,
not turning on, nothing. And so try to diagnose a few things, make a few things work. Couldn't. Long story short, we have to call a tow company. Tow company comes and tows the truck. We are it's just outside of Seattle. Mm-hmm. And the closest dealership, Freightliner place that could work on it was Freightliner Northwest in the Seattle area. You know that place.
Sure.
Yeah. And so we call them. They say they can get out and they could possibly start looking at it that evening. If not, they could probably start diagnosing it the next day. So call a tow company. Tow company comes and tows the truck. the tow company had another truck, like an actual truck, that they were then able to take our trailer, deliver the load. And so we ended up delivering the load the same day. It was a few hours late, but broker again, when you solve those problems, brokers are impressed.
Right.
They like that because they realize that trucks are going to break down, weather happens. And when you can solve those problems, that helps cement relationships, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today.
It's all tying together,
It's
Chris.
all tying together.
I love it.
And so anyway, that to tow the truck to the dealership and to deliver the load was about a little over $2,000.
Okay. And the tow truck driver the tow truck company is the one actually making the delivery at that point?
So our driver rode with them.
Okay.
We rode with the tow truck person to the delivery.
Okay, to the
delivered
receiver.
the load and came back. They brought her back to, I think, the dealership, and we ended up, it's one of those situations whenever you have a truck that's down, like it's going to be in the shop like that overnight, like we get a hotel for the driver. So she ended up going to a hotel. So that was February 1st. They didn't work on it that night.
That was a Thursday, by the way, just to set the scene.
Thursday. So Friday, they said that possibly their second shift could look at it. That didn't happen.
You know what? Can I stop right there
Yeah.
and just say, if you are any kind of service provider, including in trucking, possibly
Probably
ain't
not
going to
gonna
cut
happen.
it.
Yeah.
Don't say it. Don't do it. Don't say it.
Yeah.
You're setting yourself up for a bad relationship if you say, we can get to it. Like, you better say, look, here's what I can guarantee you. And then if you can over deliver on that promise, great. But possibly we'll get it this afternoon.
I
Awful.
am a firm believer of under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
Like that is by far one of the best business practices is out there.
Yeah.
Because not only have they like damaged the relationship for us, we will never go back to that Freightliner again. But now I'm talking about it on the podcast.
Right. There you go.
Take it for what it's worth. All right. So February 2nd, nothing. February 3rd, somebody drove it around the parking lot for 9 minutes.
What?
And so they were able to get it to start.
I see. Okay.
And they drove it around the parking lot for 9 minutes.
I thought they're doing donuts up in Seattle.
Probably. They may have. And they couldn't get it to duplicate the issue, which granted, like I'm giving them a little bit of credit here. Electrical issues can be a pain in the butt.
They can be finicky.
Yeah.
The wire
And so-
touches, the wire doesn't touch, whatever.
So I get that, but I don't think they put much effort into it because they drive around for 9 minutes and that's it. That was Saturday. Sunday, February 4th, the truck just sat. Monday, February 5th, they test drove it again around the area. So they actually went outside of their lot, drove for 27 minutes, and they weren't able to find anything in it. They kept telling us that day that you're like at the beginning of the day, you're the 10th, there's 10 trucks in front of you to get test drove.
You are the 10th caller.
Towards the end of the day, there's 10 trucks in front of you to get test drove. So, I mean, that's like what we're getting all day long. So still at this point, February 5th, we're 4 or 5 days into it now.
Monday.
Still no diagnosis. Then Tuesday, February 6th, that they couldn't figure anything out. And we were told it is going to be another week before they're going to be able to look at it again. So like, to me, at that point, it just feels like they've kind of given up on it. And so obviously it's driving at this point, right? They've essentially test drove it twice, and we can confirm that through the ELD. Like we saw that was going on the ELD. They pulled some fault codes, but that was essentially about it. We decided at this point it was better off we'd called the Freightliner in Portland, Oregon, which is also, they're affiliated with the Freightliner in Salt Lake that we use. So we figured we'd have a little bit more pull with them. We made the decision, okay, we're going to try to get that truck down to Portland. So driver gets back in the truck, pulls out of the parking lot.
It shuts down.
It shuts down in the middle of the road.
Oh my gosh. Now, for heaven's sake. Okay. Was she going to be deadheading all the way down to Portland? Because that's an additional 200-300 miles. And
which that's okay. because the alternative was to get towed,
all
which
the way
is
back
what
to
we
Salt
ended up
Lake.
having to do. We ended up towing it from where she was in the Seattle area down to Portland.
Oh,
So that's another $3,000 tow bill. And we got charged almost $1,000 for their diagnosis that they were never able to figure anything out on.
that is horrible business practice. Okay. Is this a Freightliner issue, or is this this individual shop?
I think
issue?
it's the individual shop. Like
Yeah.
we've never had this. Like the Freightliner in Salt Lake that we've dealt with is great.
Yeah.
And as you'll find, the Portland, Oregon Freightliner was great too. So they get it essentially the night of the 6th. The 7th, they are able to work on it, diagnose it, and they find some wiring harnesses. And this is not the first time we've had this happen with some of our Freightliners. So this is kind of frustrating. Like wire harness rubs through, wires short out.
Right.
They find that. And to make a long story short, they get it repaired. You like it when I say that, huh?
I laugh every time you say that.
February 8th, they finished doing the repair. They charge us $738.68 to fix it and reinstall the drive lines after the tow.
So they diagnosed, they repaired, they got you back on the road for $700 after you had spent $5,000
$5,000 in towing,
getting it there.
$1,000 in
diagnosis.
Yeah. And then another $350 in storing our trailer because we had to store the trailer in Portland.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or not, no, in Seattle.
In Pacific.
Yeah, in Seattle. So we had to, after it got repaired, Jeannie had to drive all the way back up to Seattle to grab the trailer.
Awful.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this the end of the saga?
So that's 8 days
Oh my gosh.
before we got the truck back.
So not only is it costing you upfront cost, okay, there's the tow bills, there's the repair bills, but the
hotel bill,
the hotel
driver
bill,
pay, because you can't just
you're not just gonna
leave the driver out to dry.
Yeah. But then also there's the what do they call it? The opportunity cost of something like this, where you're missing out on 8 days.
1,000 days of $1,000 a day in revenue, which is kind of
Right.
what we try to get. Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, it was.
So yeah, you must be pretty livid at that place.
It to me, it was pointless, right? Like they just did not do a good job. They essentially gave up on the repair. And I kind of almost feel like, was it really that hard of a repair? Because the Freightliner in Portland had it done in like essentially 24 hours.
Right. That's, okay. Portland for the win, because the last time I was in Portland, what do you call the drip tray underneath I'm in my little Mazda, right? Mm-hmm. The tray underneath your engine broke loose.
The oil pan?
Well, it wasn't the oil pan, but whatever. It's flapping in the wind. So anytime I'd go over 70, it would just start thump, 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 thump. It was incredibly annoying. I had my whole family with me and went to an auto body shop and said, "Hey, here's what's going on. Can you guys help me out?" And they wouldn't let me pay them. They had it fixed in 8 minutes.
Wow.
Here's your
that's
keys.
awesome.
Hey, just leave us a good review on Google, and you better believe I did.
I'll bet you did.
We can make all the fun of Portland we want for some of the news stories they produce, but
Apparently they're very passionate about their vehicle repairs.
there you go. Yeah, absolutely. So that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's total cost somewhere between $7,000 and $8,000, it sounds like?
It was probably, by the time you add the hotel rooms and driver pay without any revenue, I bet we were getting pretty close to 10.
Right. Well, and then the opportunity cost, it's more like 15 plus.
Yeah.
So that's
No bueno.
yeah, that's no bueno. Okay. Avoid that shop.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
Should we jump into the more pleasant topics?
Yeah, I'm just glad this isn't a financials episode, because we were in such a good mood after the last one. This is really shorting that out. Speaking of shorts. So
Speaking of that, I've got to take a phone call.
okay. What in the heck were we just talking about?
I don't know, but we had to take a pause there because dealing with more trucking. This will probably be maybe an intro to another another episode because we already took so much time in that first story. But dealing with a load that looks like it's going to get rejected, and it's been a fun one.
It always is, right, Chris? Okay, Chris, let's talk about building relationships. Let's talk about how that helps you find loads. Now, this is a recurring theme on this podcast, building relationships. In fact, when in another area of my professional work, I've learned the rule, the 80-20 rule. There are a lot of 80-20 rules out there, but in this case, it's spend 80% of your time building relationships and 20% of your time using tools out there. So, whether you're job hunting or you're, booking loads, I suppose. But right, the 80-20 rule, how does that sound to you for something like this?
I like it. It's important. Like building relationships, as we get more into this episode, you're going to find is really key. It's critical. And I, kind of as I was thinking about how this works and what I'm thinking about, it kind of reminds me of real estate. I mean, we've talked a little bit about real estate in the past. It's kind of one of my passions. And one thing that, most savvy real estate investors and people that deal with real estate will tell you is that the very best real estate deals are deals that never hit the market. Right? They get scooped up by somebody before they even come onto the market. And the more that I've been dispatching and finding loads, the more I realize like that's exactly the same thing that happens in trucking.
Right.
The good paying loads are not the ones that are on the load board. We've talked about this, the importance of getting direct shipper relationships, and that's really important. But the next most important thing is to get, a good network of brokers that can help you, especially on return loads, get stuff back. Because the same thing happens. Like oftentimes, like when a broker gets a load, they are first going to reach out to carriers that they know and trust and see if they're going to have a truck in the area. And if they can't find that, then they'll go to a load board and post the load on the load board. So a lot of that stuff, loads are getting scooped up in that first scenario where the broker reaches out to carriers. And the same thing happens with carriers. Like when I know I've got a truck that's going into an area where I've got a relationship with a broker, the first thing I do is reach out to the broker and say, hey, I'm going to have a truck in this area. Do you have any available loads? And, when I first started doing this, I was finding all of my non-direct shipper loads. So basically anything outside of Utah, I was finding directly from load boards. But in January, I booked 41 of those outside of Utah loads.
The return loads.
Okay. And 20 of them I got from a load board, but 21 of them I got before they even hit a load board.
Ooh, you broke the 50% mark.
I broke the 50% mark. Yeah,
Nicely done.
Yeah. So that makes me happy. And typically those loads are also, better paying ones. Like, it's kind of the same thing with real estate. There are loads that have never hit the public market. Like brokers are going to go with carriers they trust more, and they're going to pay them more. And so that's really like why building relationships is so important. So you can get those loads that never hit the market.
Right. Okay. So that's a good why to build these relationships. You want to find loads more easily, and you want to find better paying loads. But what about the how? How does somebody actually go about doing that? How do you build these relationships? Where do you start? That's
a great question. And the first place you really start is just with brokers that are in your local area. Even though, let's say in our situation, like when I first started dispatching, we already had our shippers set up, and most of our outbound out of Utah loads were going direct from shippers. So we weren't even using brokers for that. So then you say, Chris, hey, why do I even care about my relationships with brokers that are here in Utah when your Utah freight's covered?
Well, it's not all covered, is it? You still have gaps to fill. Well, and also these brokers are probably bringing loads in as well.
That's it.
Right?
Exactly. That's it. They're the brokers, even though, brokers that are based in Utah don't just focus on getting stuff outbound
Out of Utah.
but they also are typically able to solve the inbound stuff, and so they also typically have a lot of inbound loads. And so if you start, that's where you're going to find the vast majority of them, not all of them, but if you can start with brokers that are based in your area, their sales force is typically based in the same area, and they're typically finding loads. Most of what they cover are either loads going out of Utah or coming back into Utah. And so I think that's the first place to start. That's where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's where you're going to look is brokers. Any tips on how to approach them or how to find them? Do you just Google, freight brokers in my area?
I think there's a couple ways to do it. Yeah, you can Google like Utah-based freight brokers, and you'll be able to find some in that situation. Another thing, and this is probably the easier way to do it. It'll just typically take a little bit more time, but when you do find stuff on the load board, and this is really how I actually probably got a lot of some of the relationships with brokers we were already using before I started dispatching. And I kind of use those relationships too. But when I'd find somebody on a load board for a new brokerage, you're going to find that and you're going to try to do a good job for them. Once that load's completed, you're going to try to do some things that will build on that relationship. So, I'd find a lot of brokers initially on their load board, but then you try to expand that relationship once you haul a load for them the first time. So whenever, this is just like how I try to do business in general anyway, but always provide exceptional customer service, always try to solve their problems, don't be their headache, and
don't use the word possibly.
Really well. Don't use the word possibly. Yeah. I might be able to get it there on time.
Right.
Under promise and over deliver.
Is there any, as you're building a network of brokers, they know you're doing that, right? There isn't any concern, I would imagine, with, how dare you reach out to that broker? I thought you were my guy, right? Is there any of that?
Not really. I mean, not that I know of anyway.
Maybe there are some rivalries out there.
There might be some, but you can't, there's no broker out there that expects you to be able to keep your truck occupied just with them. And so there does, like any kind of relationship, there has to be some give and take. You take, for example, we talked a lot about, maybe you've got all your loads outbound covered, and you're just using a brokerage mostly for inbound stuff, but they may have an emergency that comes up where they've got a load that's, based in your local area that needs to get out, and they need help with it in an emergency. If you can fill that, even if it may not be the best paying thing you can get, it might be worth it to do every once in a while, because you're helping them. That just cements that relationship even more.
Okay, good. Any other tips on the how to start building those relationships, or how to find these people?
Well, just to kind of expand on it, just do everything you can to have good customer service. So whenever I would finish a load with somebody, I would do a follow-up email and just, hey, and appreciate the load. Hope you had a good experience with us. And then, hey, we'd like to try to haul more loads with you guys. Do you have a phone number I can contact you? You may already know the phone number, but I'd ask if I can set up a call with them. Then so I'd set up a phone call with them and see if we can, see if we're a good match for each other. See where their freight's coming from, what problems that we can help solve, and just see if there's an opportunity there that we can do business together a little bit more. And it may take 10 of those conversations before you find one that actually bears a little bit of fruit. But you have to go through those. They're not really rejections, but kind of rejections until you get one or two that actually works.
Yeah.
You just
call them misfits.
They're
maybe
misfits.
It's just not quite
not
fit.
a good match.
Yeah.
And that happens. It's like dating.
It's
matchmaking.
It's nobody's fault, right?
It's nobody's fault. Yep.
So you've got a checklist here that I'm looking at with these notes, and I use that word advisedly because we talked about checklists with the Chris's dumb mistake from the last episode, right? Having a checklist, and I would say, please, everybody, check the notes. There'll be a little checklist in there. Use it, and when you book that load, go down the list. Did I X? And do you want to kind of just give us the bullet point checklist? What do you do? So you've already said it. Look, we're repeating ourselves, but that's never such a bad thing. So you book a load with a new broker. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you do?
I stay in constant contact with them. Brokers can get annoying because they'll email you all the time and, hey, what's your current location of this truck, or what's the reefer temperature set at if you're doing reefer loads, and that kind of thing can get annoying. But you've got to have they're your customer, right? You've got to treat them well and
communicate. So make sure you're communicating.
If you're ghosting them and you're not responding to them in a timely manner, then that gets annoying to them and builds frustration, and they're not going to want to do business with you. So I always I'm pretty anal about my emails, like during the business day. And while I've been dispatching, like my business day starts no later than 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm really going till at least 5 o'clock at night. Like I'm constantly looking at my email, and I strive, like probably 95% of the time I'm responding to an email in less than 30 minutes.
Right. Okay. And so number one, communicate
in a timely manner.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. What's number two?
Do what they ask, and that's usually so responding to the emails, getting your truck to pick up on time. If they ask for a copy of the BOL before your driver leaves the shipper, do those kind of things. Just show that you're on the ball and attentive to them. And that goes a long way, because a lot of places just get frustrated with that and just don't do it, or they ignore.
Right.
Like, you'd be surprised, like that little extra push on customer service makes a big difference, because so many other companies just don't do it.
You ever had a broker make an unreasonable amount of requests like that you've had to say, all the time, back off?
Yeah, and that happens more. Like, I don't have as big of an issue with them making unreasonable requests to me all the time, but when they start contacting drivers and call them at like all hours, this is one of the things that really bugs me about brokers. Like, drivers drive different hours. Like there's some that drive in the middle of the night and sleep in the day. You don't know when they're up and about, and it's unsafe to call a driver and bug a driver while they're trying to sleep. Like it really bugs me. Like, brokers, like, they should call me. I can give them an exact location. I can stay on top of things. And that's like another one of those things that's really nice about building relationships, is when you build a relationship with a broker, they start to gain trust with you, because you deliver and you do what you say you're going to do, so that they don't annoy you as much with, they're called check calls. They don't annoy you as much with check calls and other things, because they trust you. They know that if there is a problem, that you're going to proactively reach out to them, and they're not going to find out that your truck's not on time because they don't show up on time. They're going to find out like a day in advance, or as soon as, like, there might be a problem with an on-time delivery, like you're communicating that as soon as possible.
Now, this is, in your situation, you are dispatching for, almost a dozen trucks. So you're like, hey, reach out to me. Let's put ourselves in the owner-operator shoes. What would you think of, okay, I'm driving, I'm an owner-operator, and I am off the clock, I need to sleep. You ever set like one of those vacation auto replies? And it's just like, for the next 8 hours, anybody who emails me gets an automatic response. I am dead asleep. I will get back to you. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a good. That'd be nice to be able to do with text messages too. But
right.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Just so that they just don't feel like they're ghosting you, or you're ghosting them. Yeah. Another thing you could do as an owner operator is, if you're going to be out, you just send an email to the broker and say, hey, I've stopped here for the night. I'm going to be resting for the next 10 hours. If you have an emergency, call me. Otherwise, please leave me alone. And in that situation, a broker really should not have an emergency.
Right. So. Okay. So number one, communicate well and quickly. Number two, do what they ask you to do. Provided it's a reasonable thing for them to ask you to do, and it usually will be. Number three.
So get them the BOLs, the bills of lading, or the proof of delivery, whatever you want to call them, in a timely manner. So as soon as the load's completed, make sure you email them everything, because they also need that
the documentation,
because they need that to be able to bill their customer. And so if you're waiting 5 days to get that stuff to them, then they can't bill their customer, which a lot of these brokers aren't going to pay you until they've been paid. And so
of course.
It just delays your payment. So get everything to them as quickly as you can.
Okay, good. So documentation, follow up, make sure everything's done quickly, right? Again, quickly as possible. Number 4 then.
And then usually a day or two later is when I'll send a follow-up email. If it's somebody that I want to do business with again, I'll send them a follow-up email again, thanking them for the load. Hey, can I give you a call to talk about possibly doing more loads together and, see if we can figure out if we match up well with the lanes we run and the lanes you need covered. And then if they respond yes to that, then I'll give them a call and we'll chat through that.
Yeah. And I imagine you're not taking up their whole day. This is a 10 or 15 minute, what do you do? Here's what we do. Thanks very much. Okay. So that's number 4 is a follow-up email, a thank you email, and a request for a little chat. All right. Number 5 then.
So the number 5, like with any kind of sales process, you're going to want to follow up with them and maintain that relationship on a regular basis. And so if you're hauling loads for somebody on a fairly regular basis, then like you should have some kind of phone call or communication, whether it's once a month or once a week, where you may just contact them to shoot the breeze, to see how things are going,
right? Not
necessarily about a specific load. You don't want to do things like that. So one of the things that I've started doing with some of the brokers that are Utah based that I've been working with on a more regular basis, I'll go to lunch with them once a month and just get to know them a little bit better and find out, are we doing well? Is there anything we can do better? And that right there is probably the best way there is to cement a relationship.
Yeah. And it's, it is not offensive. In fact, quite the opposite. To have a business lunch, you're not best friends necessarily. I mean, hey, maybe you guys get along great, fine. But taking somebody out to lunch like that, I like what you said. You're asking them, how are we doing? What can we do better? What have you appreciated? Et cetera, et cetera. This isn't like, hey, I need to know the name of your dog and all of your kids. Like, it's a business lunch, right?
Yeah, and it shows them that you care about the relationship. It shows them that you want to do a good job for them. And it's because it is a business relationship, like that's what's important to them.
Yeah.
They want to know that you are going to pay attention to them and you're going to, you care about the relationship and you're going to do what it takes to make sure you hold up your end of the bargain.
Yeah. And exactly. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying and don't have any small talk. I'm just saying like the priority is make sure the business relationship is solid.
Yep.
Fair?
I like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're communicating well. We're doing what they ask. We follow through, especially with documentation in a timely manner. Send a follow-up thank you email. And if things went well through all this process, try to set up a phone call to begin a more consistent relationship. All right.
And then can be that consistency, continue to follow up, continue to nurture that relationship. Like any kind of relationship, if you don't nurture it, it's going to die eventually. So.
Tell me about it. All right, Chris, anything else on the checklist, or should we move on to kind of summarizing this and wrapping it up?
Let's summarize.
Okay. So this is something that you have talked about and concentrated on for, you've been talking about it for 5 years, really, but especially in the last 6 to 8 months, 12 months, maybe. This idea of we have got to get more direct shippers, good relationships with brokers. You've been talking about this for a while. How has it gone?
So if you look at our financials over the last 4 months, I mean, we've essentially done a 180-degree turnaround. We're not anywhere by any means are we where we need to be or where we want to be, but we went from hemorrhaging to plugging the hole, and then last month actually making a little money. I think February is not going to be nearly as good as January was, and that's really, I think it's just the seasonality of things.
Not to mention Seattle.
Not to mention Seattle. Come March and April, I think we're going to start to get back into you should start to see some pretty good months again, as long as nothing else crazy changes. But really, a lot of that has been not just a lot of it. I'm going to say the biggest thing that has had the most impact on that has been the relationships that we've built. Like whether it's the relationships with our direct shippers or the relationships with a few brokers that we've been able to expand relationships with, a few that I've started that are new, that's had a huge impact on our ability to get good paying freight.
Okay, very nice. Chris, shall we impact tip this thing? 80-20 rule?
Yeah, go
Do we
for
like
it.
the 80-20
Yeah,
rule?
I like it. Go
so 20% of your time should be spent on load boards. They are valuable. They are a good resource. There's a reason that they're so popular and well used, right? So 20% of your time is doing that, but 80% of your time you should be working on building those relationships in whatever stage you're at that point, right?
I like it.
Okay, 80-20.
Perfect.
Chris, thanks for coming in. I am going to be thrilled to see what happens with February's financials in a couple of weeks when we get to see what hit, what kind of hit this Seattle story gives us. So I will see you then.
We'll see you then. Thanks, Craig.